Hello, everyone, and welcome back to. Excuse me, I'm coughing during an introduction, Miranda, and it's really not appropriate for me to cough. So let's start again.
I thought you were going to work that in.
Hello, and welcome to Tradie School.
All right.
My name's Michael. I'm joined by the wonderful Miranda Hill.
No, what are you doing? Start. Are you doing it?
I'm starting, yeah.
Yeah, but what? Okay, start again.
Starting. We've already started the episode, Miranda. We're on.
All right, off you go.
We're not going to let a cough stop us, like when we're doing jobs, and work, sometimes we cough, sometimes things happen, and we just get to keep moving through with the blips, right? So how are you today, Miranda?
I'm great. I'm not coughing.
You're not coughing? You're better than me. I better go get a COVID test or something, because anyone who's coughing usually gets in trouble these days. But what we're here to talk about today is, on a more serious note, is actually about what we call KPIs. And KPIs, for those of you who haven't really heard the terminology before, means key performance indicators. And that's a little bit of a posh sort of terminology, and some people actually don't really understand what the hell they're about and why they matter. But they're really, really critical and important things that we have to be measuring in our businesses. So, Miranda, when you're talking to tradies about KPIs, how do you explain what a KPI is to a tradie?
Yeah, good question. The first word in key performance indicator is quite a giveaway. It's the key. It's a number. It's a key number or thing that you're going to measure or track in your business, and it's going to give you an insight into the performance of your business, similarly as a car dashboard would. So we sit in the front of our cars and we're driving, and we've got our speedo, we've got our fuel gauge, and all those sorts of things. We're looking at that, and we know that our car is performing. We know how fast it's going, and we know the core things we need to know that our car is running okay. We might see the oil light flash up or something like that if we're low in oil, or the fuel flashes up if we're running out of fuel. So we're seeing the key things that are functioning. So it's the same thing in our business, and that we start measuring and tracking and have our line of sight on the key things that tell us about the overall performance and health of our business. That does not mean we measure everything. So the word key is so important. So just as we would not necessarily, who's ever seen this in the front of their car, a dial that tells you how many times you've filled your car in the last 365 days? Is that in your car? No. Or perhaps maybe how many times you have stepped on the brake pedal in the last decade. I've not seen that.
I like how my Apple Watch tells me how many steps I've done, or my heart rate, or, my rings. You've got to close the rings. You've got to have the number 12. I think it's how many times you've stood up in the day every hour. You've got to make sure that you've done that.
And that's great. I mean, those are great numbers, right? Same sorts of things. So these are all like key performance indicators. They're things that we can measure, but key is the main word. So you asked me how I'd explain it, is like pick the key numbers that are really important so that you know that your business is healthy. Same as when we would test if we're sick, we take our temperature. Those sorts of things. It's the same thing. It's like a temperature health check on our business. So there's a million things we could measure. It doesn't mean that we should measure them. But I'm wondering if maybe, given that I know that there's a lot of very busy tradies out there at the moment that have had to step back on the tools with the labour shortages, with illness, with winter, same, we're coughing at the beginning of this. There are a lot of very real coughs and colds because we've been locked up for so long, and now there's beginning to get a few things circulating now. So there's a lot of reasons that tradies are so busy at the moment, and it's probably a struggle at the moment. Like measuring stuff is probably not high on the priorities. Have you noticed that, Michael?
Look, I think you're right. I think measurement on reporting and analysis of anything sort of goes out the door when you're busy. You've got things to do. I've got jobs to do. I've got to get that stuff done. I've got to hire people. And then I'll sit down and look at Xero or MyOb or QuickBooks, whatever platform that you're looking at. I think when it comes to measurement in general, though, we all know that it's important. like deep down, irrespective of who you are, what business you're in, we all know that measurement is important. It's important when we're installing something on a site. Now, you've got to make sure it's accurate, right? Like a good tradie contractor, if you don't have your measurement tools, then you're going to do a crap job, and that makes a pretty poor quality of work, and you're not going to get repeat business or referrals. And that's exactly the same thing in our businesses. We've got to know what we need to be measuring, because it's easy when you're doing your trade, but there's so many things to measure in the business, and knowing where to start. And I guess bringing it back to that word key, like what are or critical even, like what are the most important things that you need to measure in your business? And we often get asked, what can I measure? What are the possibilities? Because if you don't know what you can measure, how will you possibly know how to choose the most important ones of everything? Yeah.
It's thinking about what is the most important. So, I mean, we'll go to the fundamentals. It's your financial numbers. If you're not measuring your net profit, your gross profit, knowing your profit margins, then you're missing some of those key ones. They're like your speedos in the car, like how fast am I going, your fuel gauge, those sorts of things, your rev count. You've got to be measuring those things, gross profit, net profit. One that doesn't get measured very often, I speak to that many of our trades clients. They come in and they're not measuring how many leads, quotes, or inquiries they get coming into their business. It can be a tricky one to measure. Often there's phone calls and text message inquiries coming in. But I would say that if you want to know that you're measuring one of the critical numbers in your business, then I would be making sure that you measure quotes, leads, or inquiries. Probably whatever you refer to them as. It might be, you might call it an inquiry when somebody sends you a web, like an inquiry through an email form on the web, like inquiring about something. They may send you a text message. They're inquiring about your service and maybe about the possibility of getting a quote. It may be, like in marketing terms, that's called a lead. Probably you're not calling it that, but when we talk about lead, we're talking about that. Maybe you choose to measure how many quotes you do, but this is one of the core numbers, because if you know how many of those you're getting, then you know how much potentially you could increase them by to change the rest of your numbers, your profit margins and things. So,
and those things that you mentioned, number of inquiries, our sales conversion rate of quote. So how many quotes did you do in the last week, and how many of those actually proceeded and became a client? And I was talking to a trader the other week, and I asked him that question, and he goes, about 10%. And we agreed that is particularly low for all the work required to do all these quotes. What is causing that particular problem? And these are the indicators that let you know what to work on. So you've got your conversion rate, you've got your gross profit, your net profit. I was watching that show Dragon's Den. Have you seen Dragon's Den?
No.
Go and Shark Tank was the Australian version, and I went on to YouTube and I watched Dragon's Den in the UK. Actually, they actually did an Australian version. I think they might have done an American version, but anyway, it's a similar thing where an entrepreneur comes into the room and is looking for investment in their business, and there's 5 entrepreneurs, very rich, very experienced, and looking to say, I'll give you 20% equity of my company in exchange for $100,000, something like that. They've got to get an investment, and they always ask, right, so tell me the numbers, because they're looking for an investment, and the number of people who stand there and they, I don't know, and they go critically, like you got to know your gross profit, you got to know your net profit, you got to know your revenue, how much cash, how much profit, like critical. If you don't know those numbers, everything else that you may want to measure, right, it's not as important, it's not as critical. Yeah. So I think when it comes to what to measure, of all the things to measure, we've got to start with the most important, and the most important are leads, conversion rate, our average sale, so how much we're getting paid on average when we charge, potentially how often our clients are coming back to buy from us, We've got our profit margins, so our gross profit, our net profit, total revenue. Like these are the critical aspects that we got to know before we start going granular. So, start going into the itty-gritty, bitty, bits and pieces. Because, you might want to know how well your team is performing, for example. You might want to know, like, how is your admin person performing well, or are your guys on site performing well? You may want to measure and find a number that lets you know if they're performing or not. But if you're not doing the critical numbers first, I would say pause that, get the basics first before you start going granular. And just since we're talking about it, what are some examples, Miranda, of some sort of granular things that someone could measure once they've started, got the basics right? Or maybe a better question is, how do they know where to start looking for that? Like, because, there could be thousands of numbers.
Yeah, good question. I always say start with the end in mind. It's like if you're wanting to measure maybe some of the performance of one of your teams and see how they're performing, you've got to think about, well, what are the outputs? What would be evidence of that team performing well? Is it that they produce, I hear this a lot, that, that's high quality work. Okay, well, tell me, what does quality look like? Oh, well, it's delivered on time. We don't get complaints, those sorts of things. So immediately he's going, all right, how can I measure on time? Is there a time for delivery of your product or service, an average time? Is there a number? So you start tracking that and looking at keeping it under a particular percentage or time figure. For example, I part a McDonald's waiting bay area. Now, the staff member came out. I was just parked so my daughter could finish eating, and I was fluffing around with my handbag and stuff. Now, I got asked to move out of that car park. She said, we've got a camera on these parks now. So McDonald's were measuring the wait time of customers so that they knew that all their customers were taken care of, that they weren't left in waiting bays waiting for their product, for their food to be delivered.
I can't believe you went to McDonald's.
I know. Well, there we go. I went to McDonald's. It's out there. And so we got asked to move. So I moved. I said, I'm mucking your KPIs. And she goes, yeah. And I moved straight away. And she just laughed, because I don't think many customers would realize. They go, no, I'm just eating my cheeseburger. So, that was one great one. So, going back to what I was saying earlier around maybe customer satisfaction, maybe you could measure complaints. You could measure defects. Maybe you could measure breakages or wastage rates. Do you get a number of customer complaints? Is there a wastage figure that you're looking at trying not to hit in terms of, those sorts of things which would affect profit margins? Maybe
profit per job, particularly, like a lot of us are using the sort of job management software, Tradie, etc., where you want to know, or how much money did I make on the job, as opposed to, I guess, a higher level is like business profitability as opposed to job profitability.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a client the other day wanting to encourage and manage the performance of one of her admin staff within her trades business. She's like, what do I do? She's just got to deliver high quality service. But we broke that down into the number of outbound client calls that she was going to do in a day. There was a number that they wanted her to hit, to know that they were, that was part of the service that they offered their clients, and that was wanting to be measured. There was customer complaints, or there was the rectification of any issue that came in. So any issue that came back into the business, they started measuring. So all sorts of things like that. There was the time that she was delivering or processing maybe their invoicing or particular paperwork that was done within the business that was being done. So that was how things were being measured within the scope of a position in your business to help manage performance. So you would only choose maybe 3 or 4, maximum of 5 key performance indicators that will help you know that person is delivering on their position in a way, so you can start measuring those numbers and then give them targets to hit. You don't go and measure absolutely everything, just a couple. 3 to 5 key numbers. And so it's really interesting thinking about, well, what would quality look like? What would great service look like? What would a great delivery of a job look like?
Or how do you know you have a great delivery of a job? Or how will you know that the person has delivered quality? And then you start sort of digging into, I guess, what we call the outcome of what am I actually aiming to achieve? And, that saying that no one really wants the drill, they want the hole in the wall.
Yeah.
No one wants the renovation in their bathroom. They want the beautiful bathroom at the end. So it's all about focus on what you want, what would you like, and how will you know you have that?
Yeah. I mean, so I know, absolutely. Like if you're wanting to measure the health of your culture in your business, and I see people asking this all the time, is how can I boost morale and build a great culture? And it's not always a word that gets used in trades businesses. How can I build a better culture? It's often referred to as, how can I build better morale in my business? And they're like, I'm going to do some barbecues. I'm going to do all of these things. Yes, you can offer incentives. You can also look at, what are the measures of that morale would be a KPI. Maybe that's your turnover. Maybe it's your sick leave ratios. Maybe it's all those sorts of things you can start measuring to go, all right, what would be the numbers I can look at that will measure good morale? How would you approach maybe some of the marketing? So if we're wanting to influence maybe leads or conversion rate type stuff, Michael?
Yeah, maybe as simple as how many referrals,
yeah,
or maybe the number of testimonials that you've got on Google or Facebook. That's a really, really good one. I think in terms of leads, a lot of us, getting inquiries over the phone, we're getting lots of emails, maybe you're even getting Facebook messages, we're getting bombarded from all angles about where we're getting leads. And so I think as simple as a piece of paper, write down every time you get an inquiry of any sort, and at the end of the day, type that in somewhere, or get the whole team aware of that. Because as you said, that is a stumbling block for a lot of us. We don't know how many inquiries because we're not recording it. Yeah. And so that could be a really good starting point. Funnily enough, here's another one. How much are you actually investing in marketing? Because a lot of tradies don't spend anything. They rely on word of mouth, and that becomes the majority of their marketing strategy for their business. So sometimes a KPI can be, how much am I actually investing in my marketing? What percentage of my revenue am I prepared to reinvest back into my marketing? McDonald's is 4%.
Yeah.
But they're doing millions of dollars.
Yeah, absolutely. And that number will, you start, it's even just measuring that, then start looking at what's the result of that investment. So if I was investing money into some form of marketing or lead generation, I know a lot of businesses still use, what is it? High Pages?
High Pages. Yep.
Yeah, they use High Pages, different things like that. And whatever you use is no good nor bad. It's about measuring the result of it. So if I was going to invest money in getting my business listed somewhere, I would make sure I was measuring when I got a phone call into my business or an inquiry, I'd say, and how did you hear about us? So that I was measuring the result, or the return on investment, the ROI on that investment. So so many I hear, it's like, I just paid all of these thousands of dollars to be listed for the year, and they have no idea whether they're getting the calls from that or not.
The return, right? So if you think about, if you were to hire an agency and you paid them money, what's most important to you? How do you know they did good? Yeah. And so therefore the KPI would be, what is it? Return on investment. So I spend this much, I make this much. So that would be a key performance indicator. That would be something you'd want to measure. In order to measure that, we need to know how much we're spending, how many leads we've got back, and then how many of those leads we converted into a customer. And so we've got to measure those things to be able to answer that question. The number of times people might hire an SEO company, a lead company, and they've spent thousands and thousands of dollars, and they go, well, that didn't work. And they weren't measuring consistently. To then they felt they got burnt. There was no objective, criteria to say, hey, this is what performance is. So, ultimately what you measure enables you to strategize and make decisions. And that's, ultimately, I think what we're what we're talking about today. But all that said, there is absolutely no point you going granular into those, specifics until you got the basics, and those basics of higher level business, your profitability, your gross profit, your net profit, your revenue, every single week. Get that done first before you add more. Otherwise, you're just going to overwhelm yourself, and you're not going to be measuring the things that actually create that impact. Because the funny thing is, all those things like, number of sick days, number of, of refunds, all those things that you can measure, at the end of the day, affect those big numbers. They affect your net profit. They affect your gross profit. They affect your revenue. They affect the number of leads, inquiries, and quotes that you're doing. So, when we could just keep talking about measurement.
We could. The point is that I have so many great points. There's not one point. It is you get the basics right and then go more granular. Always think about why and what you're doing. So you're not just measuring for the sake of measuring. So take a step up and go, all right, if I'm measuring this at a more granular level, what is this influencing upstream? For what purpose would I be doing that? All of that aside, measure something. And as busy as you are getting called out, I just know trades businesses at the moment have got more business than they can poke a stick at, the majority. And if that's not you at the moment, then that's a different conversation. I acknowledge you as well. Yet the majority have got not enough staff to deliver. There's a huge amount of demand for whatever it is that they're doing. And they're often having to step back onto the tools. So the last thing they're thinking about doing at night and in the weekends is, I've got to measure stuff. It's kind of like often the invoicing isn't getting done. The following up invoicing isn't getting done, let alone measuring anything and following up on anything. So get the basics done, follow up, and looking in your bank account is not enough to know if I got any cash in there. But do it. So it's as important as chasing invoices to, at the very simplest, measure those core numbers that we've talked about. Find a way to do that, because in the future, when things die down a little bit, you will be in a position to make some really good decisions. It's the sort of thing that now will be setting you up for a stronger future. So many business owners and trades business owners will not do this. They won't bother. They'll just go, yep, nice idea, great chat, Michael and Miranda, and they'll jump back on their tools. Those of you that are out there that know in your heart of hearts that this is important, and I know that that's many, many, many of you, that you will find a way to do this because you're committed to this for the long term, gathering this data and being able to make these decisions and put your business in a strong position so you can actually make some decisions to grow your business or not even grow it.
Say, anyone who's like, if you're still listening, well done. Like, we talked about measurement and numbers. Like, this is not the most exciting topic, right? And, thank you for sticking this out. Like, really, really cool. And I really want to acknowledge you, because this is what it takes. It takes that commitment to do, I guess, the boring stuff. Measurement is not exciting, to be honest with you. It's really not. But what it enables you to do is, and if you want to continue the conversation about KPIs, about what to measure, about how to do that, really encourage you to join our Facebook community, where you can connect with us and many, many, many other trades and general contractors to really sort of engage and help you to get clearer on what to measure, how to measure it, how to even understand what you're measuring. So really encourage you to join our community. And if you like this episode, share it with friends, share it on Facebook, however you want to do it. And please consider subscribing so that we can, you don't miss an episode every single week. So anything else from you, Miranda?
My parting words are, the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The next best time is today. So start measuring today, find a way. You're committed. You're committed to a future for your family, for yourselves, for your partner, whatever it is. So find a way to start measuring a few things today. Jump in the community, into the Facebook group, and ask, what should I measure? Ask some questions. We'd love to see you there. That's it.
Awesome.
Okay.
See you in the next episode, guys.
Bye.
Bye.